financial crisis. We have to make sure that we have a clear and transparent system for people to be able to have the American dream, and all of a sudden we have to make sure that it doesn't turn into a nightmare other than a dream. And I also want to thank my colleagues, especially Doug Lasser, who was the first one who actually adopted my policy about the municipality identification card. And now I see that Anthony Weiner have a similar idea. And I just hope that if I don't become the next mayor of New York City, they make sure that they help for the promise for my Latino people, because I see the way the undocumented immigrants have been treated in this city for the last 12 years as the modern way to slave a community. And Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, he fought for the right of the African American, but I don't think that slavery had been emancipated. I think it had been substituted to a new group that people call immigrant, illegal, alien, and we have to make sure that everybody is treated decently, and we have tolerance for everyone, for all the inhabitants of New York City, especially when we know that we have more than 700,000 of them living in this city. I'm willing to fight for them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wu.
Thank you. So your question was about the public-private partnerships, and I think the public-private partnerships between city government or different levels of government and some of our major corporations on Wall Street and in the financial sector makes sense to some extent, though, because I think we also have to recognize that the way our tax code is structured right now in the city of New York, it really does favor big business over small business. The tax subsidies and corporate, some would say corporate giveaways, others would say corporate incentives, they're always given to the big companies at the expense of the small companies, which generally are the minority and women-owned businesses that you're trying to give a leg up to through those public-private partnerships. So there's a little bit of circularity there when we're subsidizing them, in effect, some of the big companies with taxpayer dollars, and then expecting the big companies to then use their resources to work with government to help along MWBEs. So we have to recognize that that is a problem. To the extent that the big Wall Street companies are making the money on their own without any subsidies from city government or taxpayers, great. But to the extent that there still exist taxpayer subsidies that are disproportionately generous to the major corporations, that's something that we have to cut back, and I've called for an end to most of, if not all of these tax subsidies and tax breaks, and instead direct those subsidies and tax reductions to the small business owners. The other thing we have to do better of is breaking the stranglehold on some of the city contracts. For example, for many years, it was given that the major Wall Street firms would take turns selling our city's business, selling our city's bonds. And that it was very difficult for minority and women-owned firms to get their foot in the door. And so we would then have to they would take turns getting all the city's business, and then presumably these public-private partnerships would then encourage the big companies to share a little bit with the MWBs. I think one thing we need to do is break open some of those barriers, open the doors to true competition, and let some of the newer firms compete fairly for the city's business. And in fact, that's what I did with some of the bond underwriting business in the controller's office. And that's something that should not be neglected as well. So P3s have some potential, but let's also not forget some of the basics.
Thank you. The next question comes from Erica Gonzalez.
As mentioned earlier, my name is Erica Gonzalez. I'm the executive editor of El Diario La Prensa, and we are in our 100th anniversary year. So I wanted to celebrate that, share that and celebrate. So there's been a lot of fear-mongering in reaction to the outcome in the stop and frisk suit. My belief is that a lot of that is based on the idea that you cannot police without violating a certain level of civil rights, and it becomes acceptable in for certain communities. So my question is do you agree with this, and what are alternatives to stop and frisk that do not fuel racial profiling?
Mr. de Blasio.
Thank you, Aaron. Let me just say up front, I apologize, I'm going to have to leave in a few minutes, but this is such an important question. I think acknowledging some of the challenges in our society is how we fix things. I think that's why this forum is very, very important, because it gets at the question of looking in the face where there is intolerance, where there are unacceptable disparities, and then acting on them. So just one point from the previous round, talking about the fact that 46% of our folks are living at or near the poverty level is part of addressing the problem. It is actually part of working towards unity to acknowledge unfairness and disparity. it's not good to sweep it under the rug. And I think it gets right to the point that Erica raises about stop and frisk. The debate, often fueled by the mayor and the police commissioner, has suggested somehow that you either stand with public safety or you stand with civil liberties. That is a false choice. That is a choice that does not represent the values of the United States of America. This is a republic founded on the notion that law and order and respect for civil liberties walk hand in hand. So I think there has been fear-mongering. I think there was fear-mongering even the other day after the judge's decision, but I think it's preceded it as well. It is clear to me that you can police effectively while scrupulously respecting constitutional rights. In fact, when you're engaged as a police officer in a proper approach to policing, respecting the Constitution, there's plenty you can do effectively. And further, you encourage in the process communication from the community. And this is the crucial point about how we will be safe in the future. A partnership between police and community, respect between police and community, flow of information, that is the pathway to safety, because as any police officer will tell you, if they know where weapons are and they know where criminals are, because community residents help them find out. If the community residents provide that intelligence, that is the way to keep people safe. So the fear-mongering needs to end, because it's all been about a false choice to begin with. But actually, the path to safety runs through healing the relationship between police and community.
If I can take a stab at this, you know where you can find evidence that fewer stops actually reduces crime? New York City, 2013. While the trial has been going on, this police department has been dramatically dropping the number of stops, perhaps definitely in reaction to the trial. What's going on with crime? It's kept going down. And I ask my fellow citizens this question. If you are stopping someone that did nothing wrong, you have a police officer that is engaged doing that instead of stopping someone who did something wrong. So almost by definition, wide numbers of stops that don't lead to any evidence, don't lead to any crime, don't lead to any violations or tickets or anything is a waste of time. But let's give the attention where it's due to the mayor's rationale for this policy. He and the police commissioner say, well, if we stop enough people, it has a deterrent effect on the bad guys. That is the most dangerous of all rationales, because that's where you get to a place, well, I guess then 100% security means everyone gets stopped every single day. That's not America. Let me give you some specific suggestions. One, before the court even suggested, I proposed having small cameras on police officers. It helps protect them from false charges, helps gather information that can be used as trial, and also can be used for training. Secondly, you use something called focused deterrence, which gets used in other cities, which is a much more of a pursuit of the narrow band of people that does it. You know, all of us, or several of us, slept over public housing just to see the conditions there. The woman I stayed with, I said to her, just out of conversation, I said, Madam, you know, it's a statistical fact that you're less safe in public housing. And she said, and I said to her, do you know who the drug dealers are? She said, yeah, it's George in 9F. Now, not really George, not really 9L, don't run off and make that phone call. But the point is, imagine if a police officer had the type of relationship with the community that this woman felt comfortable whispering in a police officer's ear. Think about how much safer we'd all be. And I'll make one final point. If police officers are rounding up giant groups of people in one community of one color, that means almost by definition, they are not where they should be in other communities. So the notion that the only way to be safe is violating large numbers of people's civil rights is not only wrong, to imply otherwise does a disservice. You can't be mayor of such a diverse city and do that type of fear-mongering. It's a black mark on Mayor Bloomberg's term.
Mr. Liu, and in the interest of time, we're going to ask you to compress the answers to a minute, and the time people will...
You can just agree with me.
Will let you know. Or you can just agree with me.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the mayor has engaged in fear-mongering. I think the mayor has engaged in fear-mongering, and this is the fear, look, about a month and a half ago, he had the audacity to suggest that the statistics that supposedly rationalize stop and frisk actually would support stopping blacks and Latinos even more so, and stopping whites even less, despite the disparities that are already shocking. So what we need to do is, and this is a great forum to talk about this, there is a mindset, and we have to grapple with this reality, a mindset that young people of color must be doing something wrong. This is a mindset that's pervasive in law enforcement, and even people who think they're part of law enforcement, like Mr. Zimmerman, who felt that he had to follow young